Good morning to you all here in the sanctuary and also to those joining us online. Hello. My name is Brigitte Bechtold. I use the pronouns she and her, and I am delighted to be with you here at this special occasion for our Christmas Carol service. It is good to be together in the spiritual community of love and hospitality. We strive to be love in action. You may be here to seek truth or to explore. Maybe you need comfort or have comfort to offer. No matter why you are here or what you bring, whether it's your joy, your hope, your grief, your outrage, or your fear, all are welcome. Join us in loving boldly, living justly, and welcoming radically. Welcome. We light this chalice for hope, for choosing hope, for holding fast to hope, for letting go of despair, for the transformation that allows making promises of hope, and engaging in hope as action for ourselves and for our communities, to ourselves and to our communities. Most of you already know that during the month of December, we reflect on the theme of choosing hope. This is not a mental state of wishfulness like in, I wish for a new bike from Santa for Christmas. It's not like that. Choosing hope implies an active choice between alternatives, often two of them, two different roads to follow. And then following that choice that leads, hopefully, to a better society. Choosing hope may also refer to a new way of thinking, a new way of loving, finding more to love. In other words, it may require transformation. And today, as we engage in our pageant version of Charles Dickens's A Christmas Carol, we may notice how it deeply reflects the theme of choosing hope. It shows two alternative situations to choose from, and it does so consistently, with Scrooge initially choosing, following the heartless alternative, like deciding whether to provide a free day to the clerk or not. Preferably not, he thinks. Give a raise to Cratchit? Don't even ask. And so on. But eventually, there is that fascinating little paragraph towards the end of the story that uses the future conditional tense of the verb to be. Certain situations lead us to a future that is not just frightening to poor folks like the Cratchits, but also is frightening eventually to Scrooge. and changing the conditions will change the future accordingly. If the conditions came to be, the future would be different. Just like in those exercises we did about using the future, or is it the future conditional tense. I always had trouble with that. So did Scrooge, but he's learning. So before we find out more about the theme of choosing hope in the Christmas Carol, let us rise in body or spirit to sing our opening hymn. It is number 235, Deck the Halls. We will now do the offertory. Beacon is made strong and whole by the generous gifts of time and money from its members and friends, and our offering will now be gratefully received. We are reminded every day that we live in a society where a lot of people work very long hours in harsh working conditions and at very low wages. You don't have to go to 19th century London to see that. We see it all around us. Today in the United States, much of the low-wage work is done by immigrants, but also others who are making minimum wage or less. Working full-time at the minimum wage, I just looked that up, it comes to $290 per week, and that's before taxes, which brings a family of 4 to less than half of the poverty level. In the middle of the 19th century in England, especially in the cities like London, workers were worse off. There were no minimum wages, no safety regulations, no health care, at least not officially provided. Some people became very rich by exploiting the work of others. Does that sound familiar? The extreme distinctions between poverty and wealth during Victorian times were written about by social philosophers you've heard about, like Karl Marx, but also by novelists, notably Charles Dickens, who brought us books like David Copperfield and Hard Times. But a few years before these well-known books, in 1843, he published a novella with the simple title, A Christmas Carol. And now I would like to ask you to get into the spirit of the story and begin to imagine. Imagine that we are in London in 1843, Victorian times, during the Christmas season. In fact, it is December 24th. Imagine that even on the 24th, on Christmas Eve, the streets in the financial district are busy. There is work to be done. And then there are the quieter, poorer areas, like Camden Town, which is in the northern part of London. Imagine that it is very windy and it is raining, very cold. The rain is pelting against the windows. In particular, the windows of the office in the business district, where a greedy entrepreneur and his employee are still at work. And yet, imagine the voices of the carolers outside singing in the streets. You may open your eyes.
Scrooge was a tight-fisted hand at work. He was a squeezing, wrenching, grasping, clutching old sinner. No warmth came from him. Scrooge was fouler than the foulest weather. Now on Christmas Eve, old Ebenezer Scrooge sat in his counting house. It was bitter cold outside. The fog was so thick that you couldn't make out the houses across the street. Scrooge had a small fire, but his clerk's was much smaller. It was so much smaller that it almost went out. Scrooge had 3 visitors that Christmas Eve day. First was his nephew, who came to visit Scrooge and say, "Merry Christmas," to which Scrooge said,
"Bah! Humbug!"
2 other gentlemen also visited Scrooge that day, requesting a donation to fund a help the poor who suffered greatly. But Scrooge turned them away, saying it was enough that he had to contribute to the workhouses and the prisons. And one young lass stopped at his keyboard and began to sing a carol.
God rest ye merry gentlemen, let nothing you dismay. Remember Christ our Savior was born on Christmas Day to save us all from Satan.
But Scrooge grabbed his cane and shook it, and the singer fled in terror. Finally, the hour came to shut down the counting house. Scrooge glared at the clerk, saying, "I suppose you want the day off tomorrow." In an angry voice, Scrooge told Bob Cratchit he could have Christmas Day off, but that he better be at work extra early the next day. He was Scrooge's business partner. And when Scrooge did not believe him, Mary raised a frightful cry. Scrooge fell to his knees and begged for mercy. He said to Mary, "You are changed. Tell me why the chains bind you." And Mary told Scrooge that he made the chain link by link in life, and that Scrooge had already labored to create a bulky chain all of his own. Scrooge begged for some comfort from Mary, but Mary had no comfort to give him, only the warning that he would be warned by three spirits. And he said, "Scrooge, for your own sake, remember what passed between us." And he left the room. Scrooge shut the window, and he started to say, Scrooge stopped after the first syllable. He went straight to bed and fell asleep instantly. Scrooge asked, "Who what are you? The spirit answered, I am the ghost of Christmas past. And then they took his hand and led him to a Christmas party in an old warehouse and asked him if he knew the place.
Scrooge called in delight that he appreciated there, and he remembered old Fezziwig with pleasure. They watched the people celebrate. When the spirit declared that old Fezziwig had made these people, his employees, and he and his wife so happy just by spending a few pounds, Scrooge replied, "It isn't that, spirit. He had the power to render us happy or unhappy, to make our service a pleasure or a toil. Say that his power lies in words and looks, in things impossible to add and count them up. The happiness he gives is quite as great as if it cost a fortune." Scrooge then cried, "Spirit, remove me from this place, haunt me no more." The second ghost called out, "Come in and know me better, man, for I am the ghost of Christmas present. Look upon me. You have never seen the likes of me before. Touch my robe." And Scrooge obeyed, and the spirit carried Scrooge to where they looked through the window at Bob Cratchit's humble home. Mrs. Cratchit was just putting their small Christmas bird on the table when Bob and Tiny Tim came in the door, Tiny Tim leaning on his small crutch. The family sat down around the table for a festive meal. As the spirit led Scrooge away, Scrooge made a query about Tiny Tim. And sadly, the spirit said that in the future he saw an empty stool and a crutch without an owner.
Christmas future appeared. He cried out, "Ghost of the future, I fear you the most. I fear you more than any specter I have seen. Will you not speak to me?" But he gave no reply. With fear, Scrooge looked where the spirit pointed, and he again saw the Cratchits around their dinner table. Except Tiny Tim is not with him, his chair empty, and his crutch unused in a corner. Some people on the street are talking. They are business people with whom Scrooge always had good business relations. One said,
With fear, Scrooge looked where the spirit pointed, and he again saw the Cratchits around their dinner table, except Tiny Tim is not with him, his chair empty, and his crutch unused in a corner. Some people on the street are talking. They are business people with whom Scrooge always had good business relations. One says, "Well, old Scrooge has got his own at last."
So I'm told. Cold, isn't it? Great weather for skating.
A second asked, what is to be done with his money?
I haven't heard. Left it to the company, perhaps. It hasn't left it to me.
A third says it's likely to be a very cheap funeral. I don't know of anyone to go to it.
Well, I don't mind going, as long as lunch is provided.
The spirit and Scrooge turned away, and the spirit pointed to a gravestone. Scrooge approached the gravestone with fear and read on it the name of the man buried there, Ebenezer Scrooge. Scrooge cried out,
"No, Spirit, I am not that man. I will not be the man that I was. Show me this. If I pass, if I have no hope. Oh, assure me I yet may change the shadows of the past that you showed me of an unchanged life. I will honor Christmas. I will keep it in my heart. I will try to keep it through the whole year. And just tell me I may sponge the words written on this stone.
When Scrooge woke up that morning, he was delighted that it was indeed Christmas morning. He ran out to the street and bought the biggest turkey he could find. They welcomed him to join their feast. Scrooge promised Bob Cratchit that he would raise his salary and endeavor to help his struggling family. Scrooge was better than his word. He did it all, and indefinitely more. And to Tiny Tim, who did not die, he was a second father. He became as good a friend, as good a master, and as good a man as the good old city knew. And it was always said of him that he knew how to keep Christmas well. May that be truly said of all of us. And so, as Tiny Tim observed,
God bless us, everyone.
all the people who were in the play who have not come to the chancel, please come up. The choir, that would have been nice, but that's okay. And I would also like Wendy Chesson to join the group, because she's the one who planted the idea of using the Christmas carol for our pageant. And thank you so much to all of you. And of course, thank you to Mary Louise Porter, who read the story and dealt gracefully with all the technical difficulties. Thank you. You know, the story of A Christmas Carol is 175 years old. There is a name for that kind of anniversary, and I forgot what that name is. If anybody remembers, please tell me. It's the 20-something or other, the centennial. I should know, because at my internship congregation, they were just celebrating their 175th year of existence, and they kept practicing what we call that kind of anniversary. And I knew it 2 years ago, but I forgot. But that's what it is. And yet, reading the story, and in my case, again and again, shows that there are some ideas about social inequalities and abuse of people that Dickens highlighted in the story, and that are still held, unfortunately, by many people today in our own society. And I'm sure you can name 5 names just off the top of your head of examples of people who hold those ideas. And wouldn't it be nice if very wealthy people were to be visited by ghosts and would commit to treating the people who work for them at very low wages, or those who are unemployed, with more generosity, with more grace? Wouldn't it be nice if essentially free universal health care became a reality? Wouldn't it be nice? We can go on and on. Charles Dickens had a foot in both the world of the destitute poor and the world of those who were well-to-do. It's a familiar story that his own father spent months in a debtor's prison because he could not pay his bills. And that young Charles, when he was only 12 years old, had to go and do grueling work in what we would now call a shoe polish factory in London. At that time it was called a blacking factory, because we didn't have all those fancy shoe colors, it was just black. Luckily, he got out after a while, when his father could finally pay the bills. And Dickens joined the ranks of those who were criticizing social injustices of the times. When I reread the story for the umpteenth time, I picked out some terminology and references to social and economic situations that were typical for the middle of the 1800s. Bob Cratchit was not guaranteed a day off for Christmas. And Scrooge, people like him, were lamenting the fact that they would have, or would be expected, to pay somebody for a whole day without work. You better come in early the next several days to make up for that, they would say. But There was no such thing as official paid holidays. And even nowadays, many of the poor workers in our own country choose, or are sort of forced to choose, to put in extra hours on paid holidays because there is a possibility of making time and a half for wages. And they think that that's a good thing, sadly. In Bob Cratchit and Scrooge's time, there was no such thing as minimum temperatures in workplaces. Scrooge was too Scroogey to even put a decent fire in his own office. He was cold also, because that didn't make any money, putting on a fire. There were plenty of desperate people eager to take Bob Cratchit's place if he were to quit, or worse, become ill and perish. In those times, believe it or not, better believe it, I just looked that up, the average life expectancy of a male in London was only 36 and some years, less than 37. Of course, those who were well off were much more likely to survive to old age, so that life expectancy, that's an average, would have been much lower for people who had to spend their life working in a shoe polish factory or working for people like Scrooge. It was a time when conversations among the well-to-do started to use the term survival of the fittest. Many people believe that that was an idea that came from Charles Darwin. But social Darwinism that is associated with this idea was around much longer than Darwin's book on biological evolution. He didn't talk about evolution among human beings. But much before his time, the term survival of the fittest was an idea that was picked up by the likes of Herbert Spencer. You may have heard of him. And Herbert Spencer got those ideas from his casual conversations. Although he thought he was an intellectual, he called himself an autodidact. That's basically people who didn't go to school and didn't read many books, but hung out in pubs with others and got their ideas from their friends. He was not well read at all, unlike Dickens, who made sure that he was. And the idea of survival of the fittest was that in a human society, the strong naturally succeed and the weak fail. If you have some people in mind for whom that definitely does not fit, some people who are very wealthy, okay, yeah, that's a good thought to go in the direction of. Yeah, the strong naturally succeed and the weak fail. And that then justifies inequality, racism, imperialism, all as natural and as beneficial for societal evolution, as they called it. This idea of survival of the fittest among human beings claims that helping the poor or weaker groups hinders progress, as the strong, the wealthy, the powerful people and nations should dominate the weak. And that was a concept that was used to rationalize all kinds of things, like social hierarchies, colonialism, racism, eugenics, human trafficking, and more. It was also a time when Karl Marx wrote about the surplus population. And Dickens actually uses that term in this story in A Christmas Carol. The surplus population. The surplus population was a term to refer to the abundant and redundant available workforce that had been created by the economic system. That surplus population became what Marx called the reserve army of the unemployed, which is essential to accumulating capital and keeping wages down where they should be. Earlier in the century, that large group of destitute people was simply called overpopulation by Thomas Malthus. It was overpopulation because the amount of food and resources in a society grows only arithmetically, by which he meant like adding a field here or a factory there. But the number of people, he would say, grows exponentially, especially among the poor, Malthus said, because, very laughable in our time and with our levels of education, because Malthus said they don't have the moral restraint to limit the sizes of their families, unlike those who are well off. Give me a break. So, Malthus said, we should be thankful for wars and diseases that limit the numbers of the poor. And if you remember listening to A Christmas Carol, Dickens uses that term arithmetic and arithmetically, because he had read that stuff. Dickens saw through all of that, especially because he knew what it was like to be poor. And he knew very well that being well off or rich had little to do with human ability and much to do with inherited wealth and the very nasty ways in which that had been accumulated over time. His little novella and his other books brought this to the attention of many, many people. I think he performed the novella in person 127 times or so, maybe 157, a huge number of times. And it is a very long story. It's called a novella, but it is more than 100 pages. And in England, it is still performed in its entirety. One of my granddaughters in her school, she's in the last year in a school in England, and she and two other students read the whole thing just a week and a half ago. And it's a thing over there. You read the whole thing once a year. Now, Dickens was not the only one writing about such conditions. There is an author, Elizabeth Gaskell, who wrote North and South. And that title, North and South, is not about our North and South from the Civil War times. It's about the north of England and the south of England. In the north, there were many factories. The textile factories were around Manchester in the north. And the land-holding nobility were more in the south, around London. So she wrote that book. Actually, she had called it something else. She had named it after its main character. Does anybody know who that main character is? How many of you have read the book? It is very tedious to read. Very tedious. How many of you have seen the miniseries? Okay, we're starting to see some hands. So do you remember the name of the person? Well, her name is Margaret Hale. And Elizabeth Gaskell, who published this book under the auspices of Dickens's publishing company. She wanted to call the book Margaret Hale. And Dickens said, oh no, because there was only so far that Dickens could go. And letting a woman publish a book with a woman's name in the title, I mean, we had to wait for Jane Austen's books to become popular to do that. No, this is a very interesting story, the story of the relationship between Elizabeth Gaskell and Charles Dickens, but that's for another day. So let's put that in our to-do list. Back to A Christmas Carol. When I read that story, A Christmas Carol also alludes to exploitation of animals, not just people. What? You might say, I've read that 5 times also. It doesn't say anything about animals. There are no animals mentioned, but they're in the sub-story. Bob Cratchit, to get back home, to his home in Camden Town, he had to walk or jog more than 3.5 miles. Can you imagine? That's in one direction. Why didn't he take public transportation? His wages were too low. So London was a walking city for those who could not afford the fare of what was called the omnibus at that time. And I learned recently, when I visited the London Transport Museum, that the omnibuses, as they were called, carried many people. They were huge, huge things. They could carry like 60 people, and then there were others hanging on the sides. But they were pulled by only 2 horses. Too few horses to carry that many people. Why not use more horses? Well, that too was part of the economic system. Fewer horses meant more profit for the owners of the omnibuses. A farm horse, I may have this slightly wrong because it kind of depends on the work they do, but a farm horse supposedly on average lives between 25 and 30 years. But in London, in Dickens's time, a horse lived barely 2 years before dying from being overworked and underfed. There were no animal protection laws. In London alone, 500 horses died every week during the time in which the Christmas Carol is set. The economic system damaged not just people, but animals as well. Dickens had nothing good to say about those philosophers and economists who thought nothing was amiss in the organization of society in the mid-1800s. He wrote this, and it always makes me chuckle, because I have a PhD in economics, and I'm always thinking, he's so right. Listen to this. Here's a direct quote, and I got this quote from an online publication that is just great. It is called The Conversible Economist, and it's edited by a guy called Timothy Taylor. So here's the quote from Dickens. I know that the unreasonable disciples of a reasonable school, demented disciples who push arithmetic and political economy beyond all bounds of sense, not to speak of such weakness as humanity, and hold them to the all-sufficient for every case, can easily prove that such things ought to be, and that no man has any business to mind them, without disparaging those indispensable sciences in their sanity. I, Dickens, utterly renounce and abominate them in their insanity. Well said. That deserves to be quoted more often. And thankfully, the storytellers and the book writers like Charles Dickens and Elizabeth Gaskell, the Unitarian Universalists who influenced his thinking, the social critics and the policymakers have and continue to counteract such callous, self-serving ideas. And Charles Dickens's A Christmas Carol is likely to remain among them, and may it be so. Let us now rise in body or spirit to sing our closing hymn. It is number 244 in the Grey Hymnal. 244, It Came Upon a Christmas. Oh no,